Hello everybody and welcome back to Screen Stars. Atomic Blonde is the 2017 movie directed by David Leitch, who had some involvement in John Wick, directed some of the scenes, but is mainly known for stunt work, etc. And the movie stars Charlize Theron, James McAvoy, Eddie Marsan, John Goodman, and Toby Jones. And it tells the story of a Cold War spy, played by Charlize Theron, who is called Lorraine, and she is sent to Berlin in 1989, just at the point where the wall is about to come down, to retrieve a list that contains details of all the Cold War spies and activity over the years that needs to be retrieved to save lots of lives, etc., etc. And this is a movie that looked very, very impressive from all the footage that I've seen leading up to the movie. I think Charlize Theron is the elite actress in Hollywood when it comes to action. She's absolutely fantastic when it comes to these kind of roles. And James McAvoy can really do no wrong these days. So it had everything going for it, this film, and with a director at the helm who brought us some films like John Wick, and is renowned for his stunt work. You know you're in for a visual treat, really. Now, what you do get with this film is exactly that, a visual treat, but it could be argued that what you also get is style over substance here. And for me, whereas the film looks fantastic and has got some incredible action and stunt work in there, the narrative is all over the place, and you really do struggle to figure out what's going on, where the story is, because there isn't really anything. They're just very, very thin threads sewn together to take you to the next action scene, which is not always a bad thing. Sometimes you want to watch a movie, just turn your brain off and have a good time with it. But the very nature of this story, because it's a Cold War action thriller, it kind of makes out that there's more to this movie, complex story-wise, than there actually is. So what you get at the beginning of the movie is we get Charlize Theron. She's being interviewed by Toby Jones and John Goodman, and they're basically saying to her, right, so what went on in Berlin? And she recounts the story of how what she did when she was sent to Berlin, and how she achieved her mission, etc., etc. So it's all done retrospectively. So she gets to Berlin, she meets up with James McAvoy, and they've got to try and retrieve this list from this guy who's wanting to defect, who's it's called Spyglass, played by Eddie Marsan. But what you've got is you've got the KGB after it, you've got James McAvoy, who you don't know who he's loyal to, you've got Sophia Boutella in this movie too, who plays like a French agent, and they're all trying to outdo each other. They're all trying to get this list. They're all trying to save their own necks, and that's the story. So, like I've said, really, I mean, it's a very hard film to follow. The narrative is there's no narrative to speak of, really. It's literally all over the place. But what you do get with this film is some incredible action scenes and stunt work. One in particular, there's an action scene on a staircase that rivals Casino Royale. Absolutely, it was just mind-blowingly good. It was fantastic, incredible commitment by everybody involved, especially Charlize Theron, to pull off that action scene, and indeed many of the others in the movie, because they are very, very good to watch. Other than that, there's not an awful lot that I can say about the movie that will sell it to you. And I think it's a real shame, because I think if they'd have put a cohesive story together here, or some kind of narrative that made sense, I think this film would have been right up there for me as one of the films of the year. The story just lets it down. For me, it got to the point about half an hour into the movie where I was losing my focus. It was losing my attention on the screen because it was just 80s music track followed by scenes of people smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol and talking about nothing in particular that didn't make any sense. And it got a bit tiresome by half an hour into the movie. I'm just kind of thinking, well, what's happening here? What are we doing? What's anybody going to be doing next? Because it literally just felt like everybody was just drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, and listening to 80s tracks at every opportunity, and changing outfits to these, what you would consider to be iconic fashions in the 80s. So it was it was a good film that was poorly told in regards to the story. But I think what they have created is a fairly iconic character here with Lorraine, with Charlize Theron. Very, very impressive. The soundtrack, even though it is quite booming and you do get a little bit fed up of it, is a good soundtrack. It's a great 80s soundtrack. James McAvoy's very good in the movie. Doesn't put a foot wrong. Nobody puts a foot wrong. The acting's all fine. It's just I wish the narrative had been better. It would have really, really improved this film. And I don't necessarily think it's the director's fault. Well, it is because ultimately it's his movie. But when you've got a director who is more known for their stunt work, it almost reminds me of Hal Needham, who created, the Cannonball Run films with Burt Reynolds and things. He was like a world famous stuntman who gave you wildly entertaining movies, but with no narrative and no story. And I think that's what we've got here. We've got a director who's focused on that side of it, but has given you no substance. So it's style over substance. It's great to look at, this movie. The action scenes are fine, but if you're wanting a decent story, you're going to have to look elsewhere, unfortunately.